You are not worth my words. That was my first thought when I heard her moan, so deep and trembling. The way a woman only moans when she's on the edge of losing control. It wasn't my name, she murmured. The voice she whispered to wasn't mine. And I remember how in that moment, time froze in an eerie hush, as though the entire world was holding its breath. I stood on the other side of the half-open door, a single fluorescent lamp flickering on the wall. Light and dark traded places on my wife's face as she shuddered with release, echoing with a fulfillment I recognized, yet hadn't witnessed from her in years. I watched her fingers dig into the sheet, her eyes rolling back, lips parted in a silent cry of ecstasy. And then, just as quickly, the moment ended. She collapsed onto the chest of another man, shirtless, bronzed, and panting with satisfaction. Her nails traced circles on his shoulder as she fought to catch her breath. I felt nothing at first. Numb, cold, like it was happening to somebody else, like I was watching a poorly lit scene in a cheap adult film. Then all at once, something inside my chest ignited. A short burst of anger, quickly drowned by shame, which then morphed into a stunned sort of regret. My fingers clutched the doorframe. I would have broken the wood if I had the strength. The corridor lamp above me buzzed, flickered, then spat out. I stood there in the sudden darkness, the harsh fluorescent from inside the room cutting across my shoes, like a wedge between me and my old life. My throat went dry. My mind roared to life with 100 questions, and only one answer. They were together. I was nothing. I don't even remember walking away. I recall the stale smell of the motel's threadbare carpet, the hush of traffic outside. Somehow, I ended up in my car, my hands trembling on the wheel. Headlights from a passing truck illuminated the interior, shining onto the empty seat beside me. It looked so open, so vacant, a glaring reminder that my life had been hollowed out in a single moment. I turned the ignition, hearing the engine sputter, but I didn't drive anywhere. I just sat there, heart pounding, replaying her moans. It felt as if I were pinned under an avalanche of sounds and images I'd never wanted to witness. I'm not sure how I managed to move beyond that instant, but eventually I was home, standing in the dull glow of the porch light. She wasn't there, still with him, I suppose. The front door felt heavier than usual as I stepped into the living room. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the black TV screen. A tired-looking man, late 30s, thicker around the waist than he used to be, hair thinning at the crown. My face was slack, eyes hollow. I didn't even blink as I stared at my own shape. That shape didn't feel real. That reflection wasn't me, not the me I thought I was. I was someone else, living someone else's disaster. I'd been living in the outskirts of Chicago for a few years, a transplant from Seattle, but it felt like I'd never actually taken root here. If I had to pinpoint the moment the cracks in my marriage started showing, it might have been around the time Jen, my wife, insisted I sign up for a fitness class. "You're snoring," she had said bluntly one morning, flinging the covers off her body. "You're out of breath just climbing the stairs. If you won't do it for yourself, at least do it for me." She had looked at me with a strange mixture of concern and impatience, so I gave in. I was always giving in to her. I found a small gym run by a charismatic trainer named Tony, a place with bright neon lights, pounding music, and relentless energy, a place completely at odds with my own quiet, somewhat introverted nature. Tony Ramirez was all charm, all muscle. 6 feet tall, lean but solid, with a bright laugh that seemed to infect anyone within a 10-foot radius. He'd walk around adjusting people's form, offering tips, occasionally cracking a joke that left the class in friendly laughter. I, on the other hand, was a desk-bound project manager in an advertising firm. My job was mostly remote, so I spent hours each day on video calls and spreadsheets. Tony was the polar opposite of me, full of life, an extrovert who thrived on applause. At first, I didn't see him as a threat at all. I saw him as a teacher, someone who could help me lose a few pounds and maybe reawaken some spark in my life. But slowly, I noticed the way Jen's eyes lingered on him, Sometimes she'd come with me to the gym, just to watch, so she claimed. But I could see that her reason wasn't about me or my progress. Her reason was the subtle glimmer in Tony's eyes, the casual wink he shot her way before returning his attention to me or another client. It was an unspoken language between them, and I was too naive to decode it back then. It started small, an extra pat on Tony's back when she said goodbye, a slightly more affectionate, "Thanks for your help." After class, a moment of lingering eye contact I didn't recognize as flirting until it was too late. I'd go into the locker room after a session, physically drained and determined to get a quick shower before driving home. Meanwhile, she would stand near the water fountain, chatting with him. I told myself there was nothing to worry about. Jen was just being polite. Tony was friendly with everyone. I repeated these reassurances as though I could convince my gut it was wrong. But my gut never forgot. The first real sign that something was off came when Jen started wearing more form-fitting workout clothes. I was proud at first, thinking she wanted to maintain her own fitness. But the shift was too sudden, too purposeful. She'd buy expensive sports bras, yoga pants that shaped her figure in ways that made men, and not just me, stop and stare. She seemed flattered by the attention, her eyes lighting up when Tony complimented her dedication or posture. I assumed it was just a phase or a byproduct of her wanting to feel good about herself. I'd mention small things. "Hey, you seem really into this new routine." And she'd shrug and smile. "It's a good stress reliever." She never told me the real reason. She didn't have to. I began noticing changes in our intimacy. We had always had a quiet, consistent kind of rhythm. Love-making maybe once a week. Nothing earth-shattering, but familiar and comforting. Gradually, she began to reject me, softly at first, with an apologetic, "I'm just so tired," or a half smile, and maybe tomorrow. Her eyes would turn distant when I touched her. It felt like I was drifting in a small boat, watching the shore recede, powerless to row back. One night, after a particularly restless day, I sat in bed scrolling through TikTok, of all things, passing the time with short bursts of meaningless entertainment. Jen was in the bathroom. The door cracked open enough for me to see her silhouette as she stood in front of the mirror. She had her phone propped up on the sink. I heard her voice, soft but urgent. "I'm with my husband," she said in a hushed tone. "But I'm thinking about you. I can't get you out of my head." I froze. My thumb hovered over the phone screen. A wave of heat rushed through me, as if someone had cut off my air supply. Her laugh fluttered, a sound I barely recognized, a private laugh meant for someone who wasn't me. The next thing I noticed was the mention of Tony's name, his bright, easy voice on the other end. I heard him chuckle, low and confident, in a way that said he knew exactly the effect he was having on her. My chest felt tight, my stomach lurched, and an almost metallic taste settled on my tongue. I wanted to storm in, wanted to scream, but all I managed was a cold, silent dread that pinned me in place. When she returned, she tried to smile as if nothing was wrong. But something in her eyes gave her away, a slight nervous twitch. I pretended to keep scrolling, but in that moment I knew. I knew that everything we'd built was unraveling, thread by thread, at her own hand. In the days that followed, I wrestled with my suspicions. Part of me refused to believe she'd do this. We'd been married 8 years, weathering quiet storms, job changes, the death of my father, disagreements over finances, but we had always remained a team, or so I thought. Now she was slipping from my grasp, replaced by a version of herself who seemed to glow from an internal source. And that source was Tony. In my desperation, I tried to address it indirectly. Over dinner, I casually mentioned that we should watch a movie or plan a getaway. She'd offer excuses: work, stress, an early fitness class. It was like trying to hold onto a ghost. She drifted, intangible, and every attempt to catch her only made her slip away faster. The final confirmation came in the form of a social media post. Jen had apparently uploaded a short video of Tony helping her with squats, his hand grazing her lower back in an intimate way. The video's caption read, "Can't wait for more training sessions. #fitness journey." The comments from her friends were innocuous enough, but one from Tony stood out, counting the hours until the next one. Laced with hearts and winking emojis, she responded with a teasing remark about needing extra motivation. The conversation hung there for all to see, but ironically, I was the last to discover it. A mutual friend texted me, concerned, "Hey, is everything okay with you guys?" That was how I found it. Right there, in digital black and white. They weren't even trying hard to hide it. I confronted Jen that night in the living room. The lights were dim, the only source of illumination a small lamp by the couch, casting flickering shadows against the walls. I stood there, hands shaking at my sides, while she fiddled with her phone as though my presence was less relevant than whatever was on her screen. "When did you plan on telling me?" I asked, my voice as steady as I could manage. She looked up, a flicker of confusion, or perhaps annoyance crossing her face. "Telling you what?" The room felt too quiet, too small. "That you're sleeping with Tony." She went still. The phone slipped from her hands onto the couch. Her jaw tightened for a moment before she spoke. "You're imagining things," she said softly, her tone too controlled. "We're just friends." I pressed on, my voice trembling now. "I heard you, Jen. I saw the messages. I watched you with him at the gym." My voice cracked at the last part. My mouth felt dry, so I swallowed hard, wishing I could swallow the entire situation. "Stop lying." Her eyes hardened, and a defiant tilt lifted her chin. "You don't know anything," she hissed. Then she rose from the couch, arms crossed protectively over her chest. "All you do is sit in this house, complaining about your weight, complaining about how tired you are. How do you think that makes me feel? I need someone who wants to live." The words cut me deeper than any physical blow could. I felt my heart lurch, as if it was about to tear itself apart. But I couldn't bring myself to yell or break things. Instead, a suffocating calmness cloaked me. "That's the reason. That's why you're sneaking around. Because I'm not enough physically." I asked, voice eerily quiet. She didn't respond. The silence said enough. I just turned away, heading for the front door, needing fresh air before I shattered. In the week that followed, my emotions swung violently from a low simmer of resentment to a scorching fury that made my fists clench whenever I envisioned Tony's smug grin. But mostly, I felt heartbreak. A deep, gnawing ache that sapped my will to do anything beyond the bare minimum. I still went to work, logged onto video calls, feigned normalcy. But the moment I was off, I'd slump on the couch and stare at the flickering TV, barely registering whatever show was playing. Jen and I spoke in stilted phrases. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Dinner?" "I'm not hungry." She slept in the guest room, or so she said. Sometimes I'd hear her rummaging in the hallway, heading out late at night. I never asked questions. I was done with illusions. Eventually, I gathered the nerve to confirm my suspicions in person. She'd left the house for groceries, so I drove to a small motel near the gym, following a trail of text messages I glimpsed on her phone. I recognized Tony's black pickup in the parking lot. Everything about that place reeked of desperation. Flickering neon sign, cracked pavement underfoot, scattered trash near a dumpster. It was there, in that seedy corridor, that I saw the door slightly ajar, heard the bed creaking, and finally witnessed the betrayal with my own eyes. Her moans, his name, her nails on his bare shoulders. I will never forget how my throat constricted, how I pressed a hand to my chest, as though I could stop my heart from bursting. That was the memory that haunted me long after I left the motel, the memory that greeted me whenever I closed my eyes. It played repeatedly in my mind, uninvited and relentless, robbing me of sleep. I'd lie awake in bed, drowning in the hush of the house, remembering how her face looked. I'd think about the color of the lamp in that dingy room, a sickly yellow, casting shadows in the shape of her curves, making them appear larger than life. I'd recall the dampness in the air, the stale odor of cheap disinfectant, and the squeak of the rusted door hinge as I retreated like a thief who had just witnessed a crime he couldn't prevent. Soon after, my anger morphed into self-loathing. I despised my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I saw every extra pound, every line on my face, every regret that had piled up over the years. She had chosen him. Young, fit, energetic. I was old news used up. I told myself I wasn't man enough, wasn't interesting enough, wasn't everything I'd once believed I was. Late at night, I fantasized about disappearing entirely. Driving to some unknown town, starting over, or maybe just never waking up. The thought of that final escape flickered in my mind more than once. I couldn't help it. Some pains slice so deep that you don't see a path forward. You see only a black abyss where your sense of self used to be. That was around the time I wrote on my forehead with a marker. I was half drunk, had found a bottle of whiskey hidden behind the cereal boxes, remnants from a New Year's resolution to quit drinking. I poured half of it into a mug, gulped it down until the burn made my eyes water. Then, with my reflection blurring in the bathroom mirror, I scrawled across my skin, "Don't forget who you are." Maybe I thought it would be an anchor. Maybe I was just grasping at any semblance of dignity. The next morning, it smudged when I tried to wipe it away, leaving a faint imprint that felt like it had sunk beneath my flesh, there to remind me even when I couldn't see it. We existed like ghosts for several days. She'd come and go, sometimes as late as 3 a.m. I no longer asked where she was. I stopped caring what time dinner was. We were past the point of polite excuses. We were two strangers occupying the same house, waiting for the final blow. One day, out of the blue, she said, "We need more bread. Are you going out?" I just stared at her. My heart pounded with fresh anger, as though she had reduced me to nothing but an errand boy. I gave a dry nod, grabbing my coat and keys. She held out a $20 bill. I ignored it, stepping outside into the frigid air. My breath fogged in front of me. It felt like stepping into another realm, away from the stifling tension inside. I walked to the bus stop like a teenager, not even bothering with the car. I needed to feel the cold wind on my face, needed to remind myself I was still alive. As the bus rumbled along, I stared at the city lights outside. Neon signs, headlights, a million stories crossing paths in the night. For a brief moment, I let that swirl of life distract me from my own misery. Then I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the bus window. My face looked drawn, older. The man staring back seemed haunted. I felt a tug at my gut, a sense that I needed to leave everything behind. That if I stayed, this slow poison would kill me. I was supposed to buy bread and return home, but my feet carried me to the train station instead. I can't fully explain it. Perhaps it was a survival instinct. Perhaps it was a desire to choose flight over fight for once in my life. I bought a ticket to a small city I'd never been to. I had no plan. I just knew I needed out. The train was set to leave late that evening, so I found a bench and sat, holding a small plastic bag with a loaf of bread inside. The overhead lights were harsh, revealing every crease in my jacket, every anxious twitch in my leg. People around me tapped on their phones, oblivious to my personal crisis. I wondered if that was how the world always worked. Your life can crumble, yet the world keeps turning without a pause. As I waited, my phone buzzed. A message from Jen. "Where are you? What's taking so long?" Another one followed a minute later. "Hello?" I switched the phone off. I wasn't ready to answer. Part of me wanted to see her panic. Let her taste an ounce of the dread she'd inflicted on me. Let her wonder if I'd finally had enough. The station announcements droned overhead, a monotone voice reminding passengers to keep personal belongings close. I pictured myself stepping onto the train and never looking back. The idea felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I sat there, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest, my mind a mess of guilt, longing, anger, and a twisted sense of newfound freedom. But revenge, a bitter taste in my mouth, whispered that I should face Tony first. I wanted him to see my eyes when I told him that he could have her. Or maybe I just wanted to punch him so hard that he'd think twice about seducing another man's wife. The fantasies churned in my brain, each more violent than the last, until I realized that none of it would fix me. None of it would erase the memory of her moans, the arch of her back, the euphoria I'd seen on her face. That was scorched into my mind forever. Violence might give me a fleeting rush, but it wouldn't bring me peace. And so the train arrived. Doors hissed open. A handful of passengers stepped out. I rose, took a step toward it, then froze. A wave of exhaustion hit me like a crashing tide. My body was heavy with the weight of what I'd witnessed, what I'd endured. Instead of boarding, I just turned away. I walked out of the station, loaf of bread still clenched in my hands like a useless prop in a tragic play. When I got back to the neighborhood, it was well past midnight. I passed by the gym. The lights inside were off, but an LED strip in the lobby shone dimly, bathing the rows of workout machines in a ghostly glow. My footsteps echoed on the pavement. I stood there for a moment, peering through the glass doors. This was where everything began. My attempt at self-improvement, Jen's flirtation, Tony's false smile. Now it stood dark and silent, an empty stage waiting for the morning crowd. I felt a surge of hatred so strong it blurred my vision. I wanted to smash the glass, tear down every treadmill, rip apart every memory of those classes. Instead, I swallowed the hatred and shuffled on, the bread clutched uselessly at my side. When I finally came home, the living room lights were off. Jen was standing by the window, arms folded. Moonlight etched her silhouette in silver. I could see her face was drawn, a mixture of anger and worry. "Where the hell have you been?" she asked in a trembling voice. She glanced at the plastic bag in my hand. I raised it slightly, as though that answered her question. "I take a walk," I said, my tone flat. I didn't care to elaborate. If she wanted details, she wouldn't get them. I was done explaining myself. She studied me, her eyes flicking over my face. "You look awful," she finally said, softer this time. "Why are you doing this?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Me? Why am I doing this?" I shook my head. "You're not worth my words." And with that, I trudged down the hallway, locked myself in the bedroom, and collapsed onto the bed. My entire body felt leaden. Sleep claimed me quickly, like a black curtain falling over my eyes. When morning came, I woke with that same heaviness in my chest. The house was quiet, no sign of her. I found a note on the kitchen table. "We need to talk." I crumpled it, tossed it in the trash. I wasn't interested in talking about anything with her anymore. My phone buzzed again. Some mundane text from work. I scrolled past it to see if Jen had messaged me. Nothing. Good. Days turned into a blur. She'd occasionally knock on the bedroom door, or I'd hear her pacing. Neither of us dared break the silence. One afternoon, I was rummaging through the closet for an old pair of boots and found a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were stories I'd written back in college, dreams and fragments of a life I once imagined for myself. A future as a writer, traveling the country, penning short stories about strangers I'd meet on the road. My father had encouraged me to pursue it. Then he got sick, bills piled up, and I chose a stable job over uncertain passion. The memory stung in my throat. Everything I had sacrificed for the sake of building a real life with Jen. Comfort, stability, a house, maybe kids, and this was where it had led me. Humiliated, unloved, trapped in a cycle of betrayal. If only Dad could see me now. That evening, I found myself in front of the bedroom mirror again, marker in hand. I stared at my reflection, at the faint remnants of the words I'd once scrawled. A memory welled up, Dad telling me, "Your integrity is the one thing no one can take from you unless you let them." So I wrote on my forehead again, "I will not break." It felt ridiculous, childish, but it was a small act of defiance, a promise to myself that I wouldn't let her destroy me. Even if she'd torn out my heart, I wouldn't shatter completely. I left the words there. Let them seep in before I wiped them away with a damp cloth. This time, the ink left no visible mark, but the feeling sank deeper into my mind. That same night, I made a decision. I texted Tony directly. Don't ask me how I got his number. I'd seen it pinned on the gym bulletin board once, for private training sessions. I saved it out of idle curiosity. My text was simple. We need to talk. Tonight. At your place. He responded within minutes. A short, okay. Maybe he sensed what was coming, or maybe he was too cocky to worry. Either way, I was determined to look him in the eye and see if he had any semblance of shame. The cold bit at my cheeks as I walked the few blocks to his apartment building. It was a modest place, nothing fancy, with chipped paint on the stairs and flickering hallway lights. Tony greeted me at the door in athletic shorts and a t-shirt, his hair still damp from a shower. His expression was guarded, but not afraid. I shoved past him into the living room, the door slamming shut behind me. The apartment was sparse. A couch, a small TV, a few motivational posters on the wall about fitness is life, and push yourself. My jaw tightened at the sight of them. Tony closed the door and followed me. There was a bottle of water on the coffee table, half empty. He picked it up, took a swig, then set it down again. You wanted to talk, he said, voice quiet. I inhaled deeply, searching for the words. Anger seethed under my skin. I could have launched at him with fists raised. But the moment I saw his eyes, dark, serious, almost hollow, I felt a wave of something unexpected. Pity. This man, who had systematically destroyed my marriage, looked oddly fragile in the lamplight. He broke the silence first. Look, I'm sorry, he began, exhaling. I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened. I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. You destroyed everything, I said, forcing each syllable through clenched teeth. My marriage. My pride. I glared at him, half wishing I could set him on fire with my eyes. What the hell do you have to say for yourself? His gaze dropped to the floor, and in that moment, he looked more boy than man. I know it doesn't mean much, but I never thought you deserved any of this. Jen. She was unhappy, okay. She told me things about how you stopped paying attention to her, how you didn't even try to improve yourself until she forced you to. I was flattered by her interest. His words fumbled, lacking the confident tone he displayed at the gym. But I swear, I never planned on unscrewing my wife. I finished for him, my voice shaking with fury, my muscles tensed, ready to lash out. But then I remembered that single, fleeting moment in the motel. The look on her face, the moan I'd heard. Would it matter if I throttled him now? Would it erase any of it? No. I'd just end up with assault charges. My life would be even more ruined. So I forced myself to exhale. We stood there in taut silence. The single lamp in the corner flickered, making our shadows dance on the walls. He waited, perhaps expecting me to strike him. Part of me wanted to see him cower, but another part of me was just tired. Bone tired. Finally, I spoke, my voice measured. She's all yours, Tony. Congratulations. I hope you enjoy what little you'll have left when she's done with you. I turned to leave, chest heaving. His voice stopped me. She's not with me, he said, almost inaudibly. When I glanced back, I saw an emptiness in his eyes. Not really. I froze. What do you mean? He dropped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. We had a fight. She said she wants space. Told me it was a mistake. That she's thinking about going back to you, or maybe leaving both of us. I don't know. She's confused. I'm sorry. I stared at him, at the hopeless slump of his shoulders. Something in me cracked. Laughter, dark, joyless, poured out of me. She's done with you too, I said between hollow chuckles. Serves you right. You want pity from me now. I shook my head, each breath a struggle. The wave of anger, pity, shame, and something resembling relief washed over me all at once. I thought about punching him in the face, but the truth is, it didn't matter anymore. My wife's betrayal had scorched the earth behind me, and this man was just collateral damage. I turned away, grabbed the doorknob, and muttered, "Good luck," without meaning a syllable. The hallway outside felt like a vacuum, draining all emotion from me. I trudged down the stairs, replaying his broken expression in my mind. He looked as lost as I felt. Maybe that was my revenge. He would carry the guilt and confusion with him, just as I carried my heartbreak. When I reached the street, the winter air pricked my cheeks like needles. I stopped under a street lamp, its cold white glow illuminating the sidewalk. I realized in that moment that going back to Jen, trying to salvage anything, was a fool's errand. She'd made her choice, and even if she regretted it now, I would never unsee what I'd seen. I was done. Finished. For the first time since this nightmare began, a calm certainty settled inside me. I walked aimlessly for maybe half an hour. The city's glow bounced off the low-hanging clouds, painting the sky in a dull orange. Traffic hissed by, an endless sea of headlights. I wandered down side streets, taking in the silhouettes of sleeping houses, the distant hum of a train passing somewhere in the darkness. At last, I circled back to Tony's building, not entirely sure why. Maybe I expected him to come out, chase after me, or maybe I just wasn't ready to go home. That's when I saw him standing outside, bottle of water in hand, staring vacantly at the curb like a statue. He noticed me. We locked eyes, and I saw that same empty resignation. He raised the bottle in a half-hearted greeting. I almost ignored him, but something, maybe that flicker of empathy I couldn't quite extinguish, made me walk over. Neither of us spoke for a moment. We just stood there, two men whose lives had been smashed against the same wall. He cleared his throat. "I think she's gone for good. She won't answer my calls. She blocked me on social media." His voice was hollow. "I guess that's that." I watched him, recalling the first time I'd seen him in the gym, shining with sweat and confidence. Now he was a shadow of that man, deflated. I felt no joy or satisfaction. We were both casualties of her confusion, or maybe our own stupidity. I looked at the bottle in his hand. He offered it to me. I took a swig, letting the cool water rinse some of the bitterness from my mouth. We lingered on the sidewalk, two men connected by a grim, twisted bond. Then, almost involuntarily, I felt my shoulders slump. My chest shuddered, and a sob racked my body before I could stop it. I hated myself for it, hated that I was showing this weakness in front of him. But I couldn't hold back the wave of grief any longer. Tony just stood there, silent, letting me cry. Eventually, I fought down the emotion, blinking away tears, feeling a raw ache in my throat. I looked up at him, searching his face. For the briefest moment, it felt like we were both truly alone, and yet, ironically, not alone at all. I muttered, "I guess you're all I've got right now." The words surprised me even as I said them. He nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the simple, painful truth. The night passed in a blur. We ended up in his apartment. He offered me a place to crash, and I didn't have anywhere else I wanted to be. I sat on his couch, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, staring at the wall. At some point, he handed me another bottle of water and said, "I'm sorry," but the words barely registered. A numbness had set in, insulating me from the worst of my heartbreak. When he finally went to bed, I curled up on the couch, eyes fixed on the ceiling until my mind drifted into a restless half-sleep. By morning, I made up my mind. I would leave. Leave Jen, leave this apartment, maybe leave Chicago altogether. I texted my boss that I needed some personal time. He gave me a vague response about, "Do what you need to do." Then, I messaged Jen, "I'm done." That was all. My phone blew up with calls from her. I ignored them. Instead, I planned my exit. For once, I wouldn't think of money or logistics. I had some savings. I'd buy a plane ticket, or maybe take that train after all. Anywhere that would get me away from the ghosts of our life. Tony woke up and found me at the kitchen table, sipping coffee I'd brewed from whatever he had in his cupboards. We locked eyes. He looked hungover, though he hadn't drunk anything that night. Perhaps heartbreak was enough to create that effect. He approached the table cautiously, like I might lash out. But I was too drained for anger. "You really leaving?" he asked after a tense silence. "Yeah," I murmured. "I can't stay here. Too many memories." He nodded, pulling out a chair across from me. "I get it." He hesitated, drumming his fingers on the tabletop. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Look, man, I know I messed up. I don't expect your forgiveness. But if you need anything, somewhere to crash, or help with your stuff." He shrugged, unable to finish the sentence. I stared at my coffee cup, swirling the dregs at the bottom. "I appreciate it," I said, and strangely, I meant it. "But I need to do this on my own." A worn-out hush filled the space between us. He walked me to the door. Before I left, we exchanged a final, understanding nod. No illusions, no closure, just an unspoken acknowledgement that both of us had lost something we thought we could keep. I stepped into the hallway, and a wave of relief washed over me, tinged with the sadness of everything I was leaving behind. I went back to my house when Jen was at work. Or maybe she'd run off again. Didn't matter. The place was silent, stale. I grabbed a duffel bag and stuffed in clothes, a few essentials, and my old box of unfinished stories. That was it. I didn't bother with the furniture or the TV. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand, a single, small act of finality. Before walking out, I paused in the kitchen, staring at the loaf of bread I'd bought days ago, unopened on the counter. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. She'd asked for bread, and that was the last conversation we really had. Shaking my head, I left it there, a silent testament to how trivial everything had become. Just as I was about to step outside, the front door opened. Jen walked in. She froze, keys in hand, eyes flicking from me to the duffel bag. "Where are you going?" Her voice was sharp, desperate. It caught me off guard. I saw panic swirl in her gaze, but I couldn't muster sympathy anymore. I slung the bag over my shoulder. "I'm leaving," I said simply. She dropped her keys. "Wait, just wait. It's not. We can fix this. We can go to counseling." I was confused. "Okay. I made a mistake." I let out a slow breath, remembering her moans in that motel, remembering how she glowed under him, how she humiliated me. I shook my head. "No, Jen. There's no coming back from that." My voice was flat. All the anger burned out. In truth, I had nothing left to fight for. "I'm done." Tears welled up in her eyes. She took a step toward me, but I stepped back, the distance between us suddenly an uncrossable void. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice trembling. I studied her face. The woman I married was in there somewhere, hidden beneath layers of guilt, shame, and the broken illusions of our life together. For a moment, I felt a pang of something. Nostalgia for the good times, or maybe pity. But it was too late. The final chord had been struck, and the echo was fading fast. Without another word, I turned and walked out, letting the door close behind me with a dull thud. Outside, the wind greeted me, sharp and biting, but bracing in a way that reminded me I was still alive. I hauled my duffel bag to my car. The engine sputtered and whined, but it started. I pulled away from the curb, my knuckles tight on the steering wheel, heading nowhere in particular. Maybe I'd go to that station, catch that train. Maybe I'd drive until I ran out of gas. All I knew was that I couldn't look back. My phone buzzed relentlessly. I spotted Jen's name on the screen, ignored it. Then Tony's name popped up once. I ignored that too. I wanted nothing from them. The road seemed to stretch on forever, an endless labyrinth of highways and city streets. Eventually, I found myself parked outside a small diner on the outskirts of town. The neon sign buzzed, half the letters burnt out. It read something like, Maz Pai. I took it as a sign of sorts. Broken, but still functioning. I stepped inside, found a booth, and ordered a black coffee. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, gave me a warm smile. I realized I must look like a train wreck. My hair was disheveled, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. She didn't ask questions. She just kept the refills coming. I spent hours there, sipping coffee until my stomach ached. At some point, I took out my phone and browsed aimlessly. Old pictures of me and Jen on social media glared back at me. Smiling vacation shots, holiday gatherings. I felt no desire to keep them. One by one, I deleted them from my account, each press of the screen like erasing a lie I told myself for too long. By the time I left the diner, night had fallen again. The sky was starless, a heavy blanket of cloud covering any distant glimmers of hope. My fingers curled around the steering wheel, my breath fogging in the cold. I began driving once more, letting the roads lead me. Finally, in a flurry of impulse, I turned onto a gravel path that led to a lonely vantage point, overlooking the city. I climbed out of the car and walked to the edge, feeling the crunch of loose stones underfoot. The city lights sprawled before me, a silent tapestry of millions of lives, each with its own joys, sorrows, and betrayals. I stood there for a long time, letting the wind whip through my hair, ears stinging from the chill. And in that solitude, I allowed myself to grieve, properly, deeply. Images of Jen with Tony flooded my mind, each accompanied by a wave of anger or guilt or longing. But I let them come. Maybe healing means letting yourself drown in the storm before you learn to swim again. My heart still ached, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a faint sense of possibility. A sense that I could survive this, that I could piece myself back together, even if some parts were permanently missing. I didn't seek revenge in the way I once imagined. Maybe walking away was the real revenge, letting them deal with their own wreckage while I pursued a chance at rebuilding my life. In a twisted way, Tony had lost Jen too, so perhaps that was his punishment. And Jen, she'd have to live with the knowledge that she shattered something irreplaceable. My role was to move on, to find some semblance of self-worth in the ruins. Eventually, I climbed back into the car, turned on the heat. A pang in my chest reminded me of my father's words. Your integrity is the one thing no one can take from you unless you let them. I hadn't always lived by that, but maybe I could start now. I glanced at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were still tired, but there was a steely resolve there too. I set the GPS for a city a few hours away. Part of me wanted to let chance decide. But I also needed at least a destination, even if it was arbitrary. The route glowed on my phone screen, a winding path stretching into the unknown. I drove in silence, the hum of the engine oddly soothing. As miles rolled by, my mind drifted through memories of better times, strolling along the beach with Jen, the day I proposed, the laughter we shared at silly inside jokes. I didn't push the memories away. I let them surface, allowed myself to feel the sadness of what I'd lost. A tear slid down my cheek, then another, until I was softly weeping alone in the car. But beneath the tears was acceptance. I was free, in a heartbreaking, hollow way. Somewhere along that lonely stretch of highway, the phone buzzed again. This time, curiosity got the better of me. I pulled over, rummaged for the device. It was a text from Tony. I'm here, if you need anything. Followed by an address. His place. The same place I'd left earlier. Strange. He had no reason to reach out again. Maybe he was just as alone as I was, and in some twisted sense, we were the only two people who understood each other's pain, even if we were on opposite sides of the betrayal. I found myself hesitating, phone in hand. Then I did something I never expected. I typed back, "I'm coming," and started the engine once more. My rational mind told me it was a mistake, that I should keep going, never look back. But a quiet part of me whispered that closure doesn't come easy, and maybe Tony was the only one who could truly understand what I'd been through, simply because he'd lived it from the other side. The drive back was surreal. My gut churned with nerves. By the time I parked outside his building, it was almost midnight. The street was quiet, a few street lamps casting pools of yellow light. He was there on the stoop, shivering in a hoodie, a bottle of water cradled in his arm. I stepped out of the car. We locked eyes. He offered a weak, uncertain smile. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Tony cleared his throat. "I'm not going to ask why you came back," he said quietly, "but I'm glad you did." I shrugged, my throat tight. I was exhausted, in every sense of the word. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted, "but I can't go home. And I sure as hell can't keep driving aimlessly all night." The wind whipped past us, carrying the faint noise of distant traffic. He nodded, rubbing his neck awkwardly. "You can crash here," he said at last, stepping aside so I could enter. Inside, the hallway was dim, the overhead light flickering. The quiet was almost suffocating. I followed him into his apartment. It felt strangely familiar now, like I'd stepped into an alternate dimension, where we were forced to confront each other without the illusions of normal life. He tossed me the same blanket I'd used the night before. "You can take the couch again," he mumbled. I eyed him, feeling an unexpected surge of pity. "Thanks," I muttered. I sank onto the cushions. He lingered, hands shoved into the pockets of his shorts, as though he wanted to say something. But the words never came. Eventually, he retreated to the small bedroom, leaving me alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet swirl of my thoughts. Sleep didn't come easily. My mind looped through the events of the past days, the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the strange sense of kinship forming between me and Tony, two men left in the wreckage of a woman's indecision. I stared at the faint shapes of the furniture in the darkness, the flicker of streetlight coming through the window. At some point, exhaustion overtook me, and I slipped into a fitful slumber. Dawn came, filtering through the blinds in narrow slits of pale gold. I rubbed my eyes, feeling stiff from the couch. I heard movement in the kitchen. Tony rummaging through cabinets. The aroma of coffee drifted in. I hauled myself up, wincing at a crick in my neck. He had 2 mugs ready on the counter. I walked over, and we sipped in silence, the tension from last night replaced by a wary truce. Finally, he said, "What's your plan now?" I exhaled slowly, setting the mug on the counter. "Leave. Start over. Get as far away as I can." The words felt heavy in my mouth, but also necessary. I can't pretend to fix what's broken. I sure as hell can't fix her. He nodded, a shadow passing over his face. "I get it. I wanted to say I'm sorry again, but I know it doesn't help." I scrutinized him. The arrogance and bravado that once defined him were gone. What remained was a man who'd made a mistake that cost him something he never fully understood until it was gone. I reached for my duffel bag, which I'd left near the door. Slinging it over my shoulder, I offered him a slight nod. "Take care," I said simply. He walked me to the door, the bottle of water still in his hand. Outside, we stood on the stoop, the chill wind nipping at our faces. I noticed his eyes were red, as though he hadn't slept much either. For a split second, I saw in him a reflection of my own despair, a man who would carry this regret like a scar. I gave him a final look, then turned and walked to my car. He watched me go, bottle in hand, eyes as empty as the city's early morning streets. In a strange way, we weren't alone. We had each other's pain as a reminder of everything that had collapsed in our lives. But I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to move forward, whatever that meant, wherever it took me. I got in the car and closed the door. My chest tightened, the finality of it all hitting me. Before starting the engine, I let out a long, shaky breath. The sun was just cresting the horizon, pale light spreading across the rooftops. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The words from my father echoed in my mind once more. Your integrity is the one thing no one can take from you unless you let them. Slowly, I placed a hand over my heart. I felt it beat, steady, unbroken. As I pulled away, I saw Tony in the side mirror, still standing on the stoop. He raised his bottle of water in a silent gesture of farewell. I didn't wave back. I just kept driving, the wind carrying me toward a horizon that promised only uncertainty. The city gave way to highways, the highways to distant stretches of open road. And with every mile, the ache in my chest whispered reminders of what I'd lost, what I'd learned, and who I would become when I finally reached the other side of this pain. But at least I was free. And maybe that freedom, born out of betrayal, misery, and raw survival, would be enough to keep me alive, 1 mile at a time. I kept driving until the city was a memory in my rearview mirror, and the only sound left was the faint hum of my engine and the steady beat of a heart that refused to be broken forever.